Imagine the heart of a community breaking in broad daylight. A 77-year-old woman, Margaret Benson, was forced by a police officer to kiss his boot in a shocking act of abuse of power. What he didn't know: she was the mother of a federal judge, a man who had turned this humiliation into an epic battle against corruption. What started as an act of cruelty ended up exposing an entire system of injustice and rallying a whole community together. Want to know how this story unfolded and what happened to the officer? Stay until the end, because you won't believe where it all led. It was a quiet afternoon in a small Ohio neighborhood when an incident unfolded that would leave everyone questioning the meaning of power and dignity. Margaret Benson, a 77-year-old woman whose life had been defined by grace and resilience, found herself standing face to face with a man who wielded his badge like a weapon. Officer Darren Allen, known for his heavy-handed tactics, demanded that she kiss his boot in front of her neighbors. The dusty leather symbolized more than just humiliation. It was a reminder of how authority can be twisted into something ugly. The neighbors watched in stunned silence, their phones capturing every second of this degrading act. And yet, amidst the shock, one voice whispered, "He doesn't know who her son is." Life has a way of planting seeds for justice, even in moments of despair. Margaret's trembling hands and tear-filled eyes told a story that went beyond that single moment. She wasn't just an elderly woman being humiliated. She was the embodiment of countless others who had faced similar injustices, but lacked the platform to fight back. Darren's actions weren't just about her. They were about a system that allowed such behavior to thrive unchecked. It's easy to feel powerless when confronted with abuse, but history has shown us that even the smallest sparks can ignite roaring flames. Think about Rosa Parks' one act of defiance on a bus changed the course of civil rights forever. Margaret didn't resist that day, but her story was about to become a spark for something much bigger. As the video spread like wildfire across social media, it became impossible to ignore. Neighbors who had once turned their heads in fear began sharing their outrage online. Strangers from across the country weighed in, demanding accountability. It's funny how technology can turn even the most private moments into public reckonings. But here's the thing: every great story of change starts with someone being pushed too far. Margaret didn't know it yet, but her son was about to take this humiliation and turn it into a battle cry for justice. And so, what began as an act of cruelty would soon spiral into something much larger than anyone could have anticipated. When Ethan Carter, Margaret's son, saw the video of his mother's humiliation, it was as if the ground beneath him gave way. A federal judge by profession and a man of principle by nature, Ethan had spent years upholding the law, believing in its power to protect the vulnerable. But seeing his mother, a woman who had taught him everything about dignity and strength, reduced to such a state filled him with a rage he hadn't known he was capable of. Yet, anger without direction is like a storm without rain. It destroys, but doesn't nourish. Ethan channeled his fury into action, vowing to uncover every skeleton in Officer Darren Allen's closet. And as he began digging, he realized this wasn't just about his mother. It was about dismantling a system that allowed men like Darren to thrive. Ethan's investigation revealed a trail of corruption that stretched far beyond what he initially imagined. Darren Allen wasn't just a rogue officer, he was part of something much darker. Extortion, abuse of power, and intimidation were just the tip of the iceberg. It's strange how life works sometimes. The very tools meant to protect people can be twisted into weapons for oppression. Ethan couldn't help but think of all the other families who had suffered in silence because they didn't have someone like him to fight for them. This wasn't just about justice for Margaret anymore. It was about giving a voice to those who had been silenced for too long. And in doing so, Ethan found himself stepping into a role he hadn't anticipated, that of a crusader against systemic injustice. But here's the thing about fighting corruption. It's like pulling at a loose thread on a sweater. The more you pull, the more it unravels. And before you know it, you're left holding something entirely different than what you started with. As Ethan's investigation gained momentum, it attracted attention from unexpected quarters judges, activists, and even members of law enforcement who were tired of seeing their profession tarnished by bad actors. It was as if the universe had aligned to support his cause. Yet amidst all this, one question loomed large. Would Margaret be okay with him taking on this fight? After all, battles like these come with risks not just for those who fight them, but for everyone they hold dear. As the video of Margaret's humiliation continued to circulate, something remarkable began to happen. The neighborhood, once quiet and fragmented, started to come alive with a shared sense of purpose. People who had only exchanged polite nods at the grocery store now gathered on Margaret's porch, offering words of support and bringing meals. It was as if her pain had awakened a collective conscience. The community, tired of turning a blind eye to injustice, decided it was time to stand together. Margaret, though initially hesitant, couldn't help but feel the warmth of their solidarity. It's funny how adversity has a way of pulling people closer, reminding us that strength often lies in unity. Margaret's reluctance wasn't without reason. She worried for her son, Ethan, knowing the dangers that came with challenging powerful systems. "You've already done enough," she told him one evening, her voice heavy with concern. But Ethan wouldn't back down. He saw this as more than just a personal fight. And he wasn't alone in his resolve. Judges who had worked with Ethan offered their support, while activists amplified the story far beyond Ohio's borders. It's strange how courage can be contagious. One act of defiance can inspire an entire movement. Margaret began to see that this wasn't just about her. It was about shining a light on the darkness that had plagued their community for years. The energy in the neighborhood was electric, and it wasn't long before rallies and meetings were being organized in Margaret's honor. People carried signs that read "Justice for Margaret" and "End Police Corruption," their voices echoing through the streets like a battle cry. It reminded everyone of movements from decades past, moments when ordinary people stood up and said, "Enough is enough." Margaret, despite her initial reservations, found herself at the center of it all, a reluctant symbol of resilience and hope. And as she looked out at the sea of faces standing with her, she realized something profound. Sometimes our struggles aren't just our own. They're the catalyst for change that others have been waiting for. Ethan's investigation was like peeling back the layers of an onion. Each revelation brought tears, but it also brought clarity. What started as a search for justice for his mother soon uncovered a sinister network operating within the police department. At the heart of it was the cleanup squad, a corrupt unit that preyed on vulnerable communities under the guise of maintaining order. Their methods were brutal, their targets carefully chosen, and their crimes buried under a mountain of bureaucracy. Ethan couldn't help but think about how many lives had been quietly destroyed by this unchecked power. But he wasn't just uncovering corruption. He was building a case so airtight that not even the most powerful figures could escape its grasp. As evidence piled up, Ethan filed a formal request with the Department of Justice, setting the wheels of accountability in motion. It wasn't just Darren Allen who was implicated. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined, reaching high-ranking officials who had turned a blind eye, or worse, actively participated. It's ironic how those entrusted to uphold the law can sometimes be its greatest violators. But history has shown that no empire built on deceit can stand forever. Ethan's meticulous work reminded everyone of the power of perseverance and integrity. After all, justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, it's about restoring faith in what's right. The case became a national sensation, drawing attention from media outlets and sparking debates about systemic corruption in law enforcement. People across the country watched as Ethan dismantled this web of deceit piece by piece, his determination unwavering. Margaret, though still worried for her son's safety, began to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about her humiliation, it was about exposing a system that had failed countless others like her. And as the trial date approached, there was a palpable sense that something monumental was about to happen. The truth, once hidden in shadows, was finally stepping into the light. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with anticipation as Margaret took the stand. Her voice, though trembling at first, grew stronger with every word. She spoke not just of her own experience, but of decades of abuse, fear, and silence that her community had endured. Her testimony was a mirror reflecting the harsh reality so many had lived through, but never had the chance to voice. The room hung on her every word, and for a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. Margaret wasn't just telling her story, she was speaking for generations who had been overlooked and oppressed. And in doing so, she reminded everyone that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing tall despite it. The verdict came swiftly. Darren Allen was convicted on multiple charges, and the cleanup squad was dismantled in its entirety. It was a victory that felt almost surreal, a rare moment when justice prevailed against all odds. But this wasn't just about one officer or one corrupt unit. It was about a system being held accountable for its failures. Margaret's community erupted in celebration, their cheers echoing through the streets like a long-awaited anthem of triumph. For Ethan, it was a bittersweet moment. He had fought tirelessly for this outcome, but he knew the battle against systemic injustice was far from over. Still, this victory was proof that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. Margaret became an unexpected symbol of resilience and hope, her story inspiring others to speak out against injustice in their own lives. The neighborhood that once felt fractured now stood united, its people emboldened by what they had achieved together. And while the scars of the past would never fully fade, they served as a reminder of what could be accomplished when ordinary people refused to stay silent. Margaret often said that she never wanted to be a hero, she just wanted to live in peace. But sometimes life has other plans for us. And as she looked around at her community, stronger and more unified than ever before, she realized that peace isn't something you wait for, it's something you fight for. Margaret's story isn't just about one woman's humiliation or even the corruption of a single police department. It's a testament to the power of resilience, unity, and the pursuit of justice. Life often throws us into situations we never asked for, moments that test our courage and challenge our beliefs. But as Margaret and Ethan showed us, even in the darkest times, there's an opportunity to rise above, to transform pain into purpose. How many of us have faced moments where we felt powerless, where the odds seemed insurmountable? And yet, this story reminds us that change doesn't come from waiting, it comes from action, from standing up even when it feels like the world is against you. Think about your own life for a moment. Are there injustices you've witnessed but stayed silent about? Are there battles you've avoided because they seemed too big to fight? Margaret didn't set out to become a symbol of hope, and Ethan didn't plan to take on a corrupt system, but they did. And in doing so, they reminded us all that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to back down. So ask yourself, what would you do if you knew your voice could spark change? What legacy do you want to leave behind for those who come after you? If this story moved you, let it be a call to action. Don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you can continue learning about stories like this, stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of the power we hold within ourselves. Together, we can create a ripple effect of change that reaches far beyond what we can imagine. So what will your next step be? The world is waiting for your answer.